Hey guys! So I've often talked about how I think that New Zealand and Japanese culture are fairly opposite in a lot of ways, and so I thought that since I've been back in New Zealand for a few months now, it'd be a good time to talk about some reverse culture shock. I have a couple of disclaimers before I start this video properly, and shock horror, I know I always have disclaimers, but trust me, they're needed. So disclaimer number one, I'm not saying that any of these things are better or worse in either country. I love both New Zealand and Japan, and I have loved living in both countries. And disclaimer number two is I didn't actually experience all that much culture shock when I moved to Japan, so my reverse culture shock isn't like super intense or anything. It's not like I'm saying that I came back to New Zealand and suddenly don't know how to be a New Zealander. That's not it at all. And most of these things are really minor. I just thought that it was kind of like interesting and entertaining what sticks with you and what doesn't. And I know that I really love watching people's videos who've moved back to their home country after being in other countries for a long time, and like their experience of their country now as they come back. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's get into it. The first thing I want to talk about is something that I know most people who move home from Japan or even visit their home country while living in Japan talk about, and that is shoes inside. Now, in Japan, as you almost certainly know, it's not appropriate to wear shoes inside in almost any place, like schools, homes, temples, anywhere that's roofed, basically, you don't wear shoes. And it's one of those things that you learn very quickly, and it becomes so ingrained in you that when you see someone step inside a house in shoes, you're like, oh my god, what are you doing? And this is definitely like, when I moved back to New Zealand, I quickly got over that shock of seeing other people walk inside in houses, because in New Zealand, it's pretty much the opposite for most people, I would say, where a lot of people in New Zealand work outside, a lot of houses have like big doors out onto a back garden, a lot of parties or like dinners that take place in people's homes, you'll be like going between indoors and outdoors, so most people just trek through the house in shoes, and it's not a big deal. So I very quickly got over the shock factor of it, but the thing I've kept with me is I don't wear shoes inside anymore because I just liked that. I think it's more clean. I enjoy like the differentiation between being inside and outside, so that's something that I've deliberately kept with me, and I've had to very quickly get over the gasp of horror watching someone else walk into a house in shoes, because it's totally fine here. Number two is informality. So in Japan, a lot of things are very structured and very formal, whether it be the way that you speak to certain people, or like the way that you drink your tea, or the way that you behave at a dinner party, or the way that you behave at a nomikai. Whatever it is, a lot of things in Japan are very formal and structured. And so when I lived in Japan, I got very used to having to always think about my behavior. And I'm sure if I'd been raised in Japanese culture, of course, this kind of stuff would become second nature, right? So it's not so much a Japan issue as a non-Japanese person, like someone who didn't grow up in Japanese culture, learning these things and that being kind of tough. So it's kind of this constant, not strain, that's too strong of a word, but it's this constant thing in your brain that you have to be aware of potential rules that you might be missing, and you're always watching other people to make sure that you're doing the right thing, especially in like formal situations, because I don't know about you guys, but I was terrified of doing something wrong. And I think a part of this just comes from moving to any culture that isn't your own, right? So if you didn't grow up in the culture that you're currently living in, you're always going to be a little bit stressed out that you're not doing the right thing. So I think like this isn't necessarily like a Japan-New Zealand thing, it's just like anyone living in a culture that isn't their own. However, in New Zealand, most things are super casual, like the way that you talk to your boss is similar to the way that you would talk to an acquaintance a lot of the time, like you greet everyone the same, whereas in Japan there's greeting rules and all of that stuff. There aren't the titles to worry about, you don't have to worry about keigo, like things are just very simple. And I know that a lot of that is just me as a New Zealander, I'm used to our rules and I'm not used to Japanese rules, so I know that a lot of it is that, but the reverse culture shock there has been this kind of freedom where I'm always surprised when I go out that my brain isn't constantly on high alert, like, am I doing anything wrong? Am I doing anything wrong? Help me, help me. So it's been really pleasant, actually, and that's something that I've really, really enjoyed about coming back to New Zealand, is I just feel like I can be myself a lot more, because I think when you're in a culture that you identify with and that you feel is your own, it's just a very like liberating feeling when you haven't been in that culture for a while, to come back and be like, oh my goodness, I know these rules, I know them. So that's been something that's been like reverse culture shock, because it's kind of like coming home and suddenly knowing all the rules and knowing what's okay and what's not okay, and it's just been really pleasant. The next thing is tattoos. Now, I've talked quite a bit about tattoos on my channel in the past, and tattoos are somewhat of a passion of mine. I only have 5 of my own, but I love looking at other people's tattoos and asking about them, and I love just tattooing as an art form in general. Now, you guys probably already know that in Japan, tattoos have a pretty negative connotation with the Yakuza, or the Japanese mafia as they are sometimes known. So you don't often see visible tattoos in Japan. So whenever I would see them, I would get like really excited and be like, oh, that's so beautiful, wow, what a great tattoo, it's amazing. So in New Zealand, so many people have tattoos. I actually live in one of the most tattooed cities per capita in the world. And so still now, to this day, when I see someone with a tattoo, I'm like, oh my god, look at that. Only it happens like 5 times, maybe up to 10 times a day, because there are so many people with visible tattoos here, and it's just like so accepted. So I just get like really excited. I've talked to so many people about their tattoos since I moved back, because before I left, I kind of took it for granted that you would see a lot of tattoos around. And when I came back, I was just like so used to not seeing any tattoos and like looking out for them specifically. So now I like go up to people and I ask about them, and I like ask what they got them for, when they got them, who did them, like what it symbolizes, all that kind of stuff. I just love it. Like, I've seen so many amazing tattoos since moving back. It's been so great. This next thing is super New Zealand specific, and that is Te Reo Māori. Since I moved back, I've been learning Te Reo Māori, which, in case you don't know, is the language of the Indigenous people of New Zealand. And a lot of the vowel sounds and the consonant sounds are super similar to Japanese, and a lot of the words, in fact, are similar. Obviously, they don't mean the same thing, but like there's a lot of words that sound the same in Māori and Japanese. And that's been really tough because I find myself accidentally translating into like the Japanese word in my head, and then sentences don't make sense. I get things wrong. It's just like a huge mess in my head. I think I probably should have waited a little while longer before starting to study Te Reo, because honestly, like, it's just an absolute mess in my head when I'm trying to listen to Te Reo and translate it to English in my head. It's just like Japanese, Te Reo, English all muddled together in a way that doesn't make any sense and makes my tutors really annoyed. So the last thing is using random Japanese words that either don't have a great translation in English or that I wouldn't necessarily use in casual English conversation. So I'll give you a few examples. I still say sumimasen quite a lot, which is like excuse me, sorry, thank you, like a million different things. It's a great word, I love it. And while there are English translations for that word, I wouldn't necessarily use them in conversation in the same way that I use sumimasen, so it still slips out sometimes, also because it was like the word I use the most in Japan, just say it for everything. I also say dozo quite a lot because it's like after you or you first, and I don't know about you guys, but for me that doesn't often come naturally in English, but in Japanese for some reason dozo, like, it just feels right to say sometimes. I don't know how to explain it. And the last one that is a great easy example is onegaishimasu. Again, has a few English translations. None of them quite fit though, and none of them feel as natural to say as onegaishimasu. So that's 3 examples. It's really embarrassing when it happens because it sounds like I'm trying to speak like pidgin Japanese or something weird. Luckily, my friends have been super understanding and don't think that I'm a complete freak. But yeah, it's pretty embarrassing. I think a lot of people would have this if they had been speaking one language for like quite a while and got really used to it and then come back. There are just some words that like don't really make sense when you directly translate them. And if you've been super used to saying those words, then they just slip out from time to time. That's it for my reverse culture shock list. I actually had a really good time thinking of this list because one of the really big reasons that I went to Japan was because I wanted to learn a language that was really different from my own, and I wanted to experience a culture that was pretty much the opposite from my own, or what I consider to be the opposite. And obviously I did that, and so it was really fun looking back on how I used to think about things and how I think about things now, what I think was really different and what I think was more similar than I realized. So all of that was really great and really rewarding because, like I said, this was a big reason for me to go and live overseas, because I wanted that different experience so that I could have a different worldview, hopefully. And I think I achieved that. I hope I did. So anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about culture shock or things that are different or the same, or there's any other videos you'd like me to make around this topic because it's something that really interests me, let me know in the comments down below. And apart from that, I will talk to you next time. Peace!